So I apologize in advance because a lot of us already know greater than symbol, less than symbol, greater than or equal to. We already know inequalities and we already know how to solve inequalities. But I do want to make sure that everybody's prepared for this section. So let's start by, what is this symbol right here? Greater than. What's this one? Less than. This one? Greater than or equal to. That line down there means or equal to. So it could be greater than or it could be equal to. All right, and same thing, less than or equal to. So let's go back to the 4th grade. We already know that 5 is bigger than 4. So which symbol belongs right here between them?
Less than.
The less than symbol. If you totally forgot or you're kind of clueless, remember, think about that alligator, right? The alligator's hungry. It wants to eat the bigger value. It wants to eat that 5 from the internet. Okay, so if the 4 were greater, then the alligator would be facing the other way, okay? So that's a trick back from elementary school. So what if I had like, let's say negative 54 and negative 58? What symbol belongs between those two? Greater than, right? Now, what do I mean by that? The alligator's hungry. It wants to eat the greater value, which happens to be negative 54. Now, in order to really understand that, we need to think of a number line. Whatever's closer to the positives, or let me say this, whatever's on the right side will be greater. Whatever's on the left side will be less. That's great. I said great instead of right. Let me show you what I'm talking about here. Everybody draw a quick number line. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't even have to go as far as negative 5 or positive 5. Just, anything. 0, 1, 2, 3, 0, negative 1, negative 2, negative 3. And let's also write this down. Anything on the left side, so let's write this on the left. Anything on the left side will be less. And anything on the right side will be greater. Anything on the left side will be less. Anything on the right side will be greater. So if I compare any two numbers, like if I say, okay, what's negative 3 and negative 2, which one's bigger?
Negative 2.
Negative 2. Why? Because it's on the right side. Which one's smaller? Negative 3, because it's on the left side. So anything on the left is less. Anything on the right is greater. So that's just a little warm up. Let's actually move on to some notes here. Now, don't copy this down yet. Okay, let's talk about it first. We're going to be graphing these simple inequalities, and I have some tips right here for you. Tip number 1, make sure the variable is on the left side. Now, you don't have to do this, but it's a good suggestion. Make sure the variable is on the left side. So do you guys see this one right here? It says 3 is greater than x. The variable's on the right side. I don't want it on the right side. It says make sure the variable's on the left side. So if I wanted to switch this around, I'd have to take that x and move it over there. Take the 3, move it over there. So I need to switch the whole thing. I need to switch the whole thing. In other words, this also has to flip if I'm switching the whole thing. So let's first make sure that we have x on the left side and the number on the right side. And while we switch, we're going to end up switching that inequality as well. Now, why do I give this as a tip to get the x on the left side? Because if it's like that, it'll help you when you're graphing. But before we go to the graphing, let's look at the second thing to do, the second tip. Once we're done, I'll pause it and I'll let you write it down. The second tip, if the inequality has a solid line underneath it, it will be a solid dot on your graph. Okay? If the inequality does not have a solid line underneath it, then the dot cannot be solid. It's going to be an open dot. Okay, simple as that. So does this have a solid line down here? No. So is it going to be a solid dot at 3? No, it's going to be an open dot. If I have a solid line underneath it, it will be a solid dot. If I don't have a solid line underneath it, it's going to be an open dot. Okay? And I'll explain why right now. Check it out. Let's actually go to let's graph this. Let's go to the 3, and we're going to put an open dot. Why open? Because it does not have a solid line underneath it. And this says what? What does it say? X is what?
X is less than 3.
X is less than 3. Is negative 5 less than 3?
Yes.
Is 0 less than 3?
Yeah.
Is negative 2 less than 3?
Yeah.
Is 2 less than 3?
Yeah.
Is 2.5 less than 3? How about 2.9?
Yeah.
How about 2.99?
Yeah.
How about 2.99999?
Yeah.
Yeah, but 3, is 3 less than 3? No, 3 is equal to 3, right? So you cannot include the 3. And that's why it's open, because you cannot include the 3. All right? If it had the or equal to, then it could be equal to 3, which means it would be a solid dot. Are we clear about that? Okay, and then the third tip that I have right here, you don't even need it, to be honest with you. This third tip, if it's a less than symbol, okay, so if you have your variable on the left side, x is on the left side, if this is a less than symbol, it's going to go to the left. If it's a greater than symbol, it's going to go to the right. But you don't even need that one. So let me do this. Look, check this out. I am going to put a giant box on this thing. Why? Because we don't need that third fact. Why not? Because if the x is on the left side, which direction is this inequality pointing towards? To the left. So you know how to graph. If this inequality would have been pointing to the right, then you'd be going that way. All right, so right now is a good time. I'm going to pause it. Let's take some type of notes. All right, so I recommend getting the variable on the left side. Okay, and what else? If you have a solid line underneath it, it's going to be a solid dot. And this third one of if it's a less than symbol, it goes to the left. If it's a greater than symbol, it goes to the right or to the right. You don't even need that, because if you already have the variable on the left side, you're already going to know that it goes to the left just in the direction that it's pointing. Okay? If you're copying it word for word, you probably want to shorten things. Like if the inequality does not have a solid line underneath it, then it's an open dot. Simple as that. No line underneath it, it's an open dot. Solid line underneath it, it does have a solid dot. Solid line, solid dot. So we're going to solve inequalities now. Solving inequalities is exactly the same as solving equations. All right? The only difference is that on your last step, if you multiply or divide by a negative number on your last step, you have to flip the inequality symbol. Okay? If you multiply or divide by a negative on your last step, you have to flip the inequality symbol. So how do we solve this? We're going to solve this exactly the way we would an equation. I want to get x by itself. What do I do?
You have to subtract 5.
Subtract 5. All right, so subtract 5 here, subtract 5 over here. My new inequality is 2x. Instead of an equal sign, we have that greater than symbol. 1 take away 5 is negative 4. Final step is what? Divide by 2. Divide by 2. 2's cancel. X, this answer is negative 2. Now the question is, do I keep this symbol or do I flip it? What does it say? If you multiply or divide by a negative number, did we multiply or divide by a negative number? No, we divided by a positive number, right? So we do not flip it. We keep it exactly the way it is. The only time you flip the inequality symbol is if you would have divided by negative 2, or if you would have multiplied by a negative number and multiplied by a negative number, then it would flip the inequality symbol. Once again, I know I'm a broken record here. If you multiply or divide by a negative number on your last step, you must flip the inequality symbol. If you're adding on your last step, it's okay, don't flip it. If you're subtracting on your last step, it's okay, don't flip it. If you're multiplying or dividing by a positive, don't flip it. Okay, so I think we got it. The only other thing to do is to graph. I'll ask you to graph on tomorrow's quiz as well. So here's negative 2, here's negative 1, 0, negative 3, negative 4. This is an open dot at negative 2. And which way is it going, left or right? To the right. Now you could think of it because it's greater than's to the right, or you could simply think it's pointing that way, so I need to go that way. Let's go to, and it is an open circle because it does not have a solid line underneath it. Let's go to a more challenging one. Alrighty, so we have this inequality. Let's solve it. I'm going to do what?
Isolate the variable.
Isolate the variable. What's my first step in isolating the variable? Add 16. Add 16. So my new inequality will be negative 8r is greater than or equal to 16. What's my final step here? divide by a negative 8. Now, whenever you hear the words divide by a negative on an inequality on your last step, you should be ringing some bells in your head, right? What do I need to do? Flip the inequality symbol. So I have a nice beautiful R. It flips to a less than or equal to, and I have negative 2 right there. That's my answer. All I need to do now is graph it. I go to negative 2. It's a solid dot because it has a solid line underneath it. If you accidentally put an open dot at negative 2, that's okay. Just fill it in, make it solid. Okay? And it is pointing this way. Why? Because it's pointing that way. Or you could say it's less than, and less than's always to the left. Greater than's always to the right. Let's try another. How about this guy? What would you do? What was the first tip I gave on the other on the notes that we just took right now? What was the first tip? Get the x where? To the left, right? I mean, you could technically get the x to the right, but my recommendation is get it to the left. So I'm going to subtract 6x. Subtract 6x. That will be 3x minus 11. Bring down the inequality. Bring down the minus 9. Now we solve that inequality the way we would solve an equation. Plus 11 cancels. Plus 11. My new inequality is 3x is greater than 2. I need to get rid of that 3 right in front, so I would divide by 3, and there's my answer. X is greater than 2/3. Now, some people might struggle graphing this fraction. It's really easy. All you got to do is understand the fraction. 2/3, well, where's 2/3 at on a number line?
Right.
Is it greater than 1?
Yes. No, less.
It's less than 1, right? So think about it. 3/3 is really 1. So what we need to do is zoom in between 0 and 1 and chop it up into that denominator 3 equal pieces. And we need to go to the second piece of those 3. So 1/3 would be right here, 2/3 would be right here, and 3/3 would be right there, which 3/3 is 1. 3 divided by 3 is 1. So we're going to the 2/3. Is it going to be an open dot or closed dot? Open dot at 2/3, okay? And it's going to the left or to the right?
Right.
To the right. So it's not that bad. Should we try another?
Yeah.
All right. I know I'm working fast. You guys are going to have time to work on all this stuff right now. This one's ridiculous. But if you know algebra, it should be easy, right? If you're solving an equation or an inequality, the first thing to do is to simplify it. That's too big, it's too ugly, it's nasty, right? You need to simplify it, make it look nicer. And how do you do that? You simplify each side, which is distributive property and combining like terms. I'm going to totally ignore this side for a while, and I'm going to distribute first. When you distribute, if there's a minus sign, I recommend circling it and calling it a negative. So negative 5 times n, that's negative 5n. Negative 5 times negative 3 is positive 15. And then bring down that 4n in the front. So we've distributed. Now you want to combine the terms that are alike. Out of those 3 terms, the 4n, the minus 5n, and the positive 15, what could you combine? The n with the n. So this 4n could be combined with minus 5n, and we'll get negative 1n. Bring down the plus 15, and that's all you could do. Might as well bring down that inequality symbol, that's a greater than. And now that we've simplified the left side, now let's simplify the right side. Let's distribute 3 again.
Plus 3 minus 4.
3n plus 3 minus 4. Now out of those 3 terms, what could I combine?
The regular number.
3 and negative 4. Thank you. So we're going to have the 3n, and when I do 3 take away 4, that's a negative 1. So here's my new blue inequality. It's already simplified. It's a little bit easier to work with. It's nicer. Let's worry about the goal to get n by itself on one side. And I always say put the variable on the left side. It'll be easier. So if you subtract 3n and subtract 3n, you will have negative 4n plus 15 is greater than negative 1. Continue solving. We're going to get rid of that plus 15 by doing the opposite. Minus 15, minus 15. We have negative 4n is greater than negative 16. What now?
It's flip the sign, and it's 4.
Divide by negative 4, divide by negative 4. Since we're dividing by a negative, that's the only time the inequality flips. N is less than positive 4. All we need to do now is graph it.
Open circle.
Open circle,
Yeah.
right at 4. Which way?
Right.
Left.
Oh shoot, left.
Remember, the inequality, since you have the letter on the left side, you could just look at it, hey, it looks like it's pointing this way. So it'll be going this way. Or you could think that's less than, and less than's always to the left, and greater than's always to the right. I'm done. You guys are not. We need to work on a homework assignment.